Okay. Didn't you say you were feminist? Feminist. Not a feminist.
50-50.
Hey,
not
I
a
said
feminist.
split.
Feminist.
50-50.
Okay.
Well,
Here's another question that we can kind of figure out here. Should women be drafted? This is an
into the
effort
military?
to figure out if you
Yes.
guys are feminist or not. Should women be drafted in the military?
So, they're debating if women should be drafted.
Like, by drafted, do you mean like when you turn 18, like you're automatically?
Okay, yeah, so
drafted?
men have to register for the selective service. Currently, there's not a draft in the United States, but all men in the United States at 18, in order to be able to vote and have other benefits, they have to register for the selective service, which would then make them subject to military conscription in the case that there was a military conflict which required a draft. So do you think women should be subject to selective service draft? Forced?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not. Okay.
I wouldn't even trust women to like fight for our country unless that's like that's their thing. You know, like if you're like that type of woman that you feel like you're stronger and stuff like that. But I just feel like no.
One lady says, women should choose to serve. Oh, so equality is now a suggestion?
No.
Okay. What do you think?
well, hold on. So you think they should be drafted based on how they feel?
No,
About-
I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying if like willingly, if you just want to.
She's saying if they want to
No,
volunteer.
just really
not a
want to
draft,
volunteer.
though.
Yeah,
If
yeah.
they want to volunteer, yes.
Yeah, but then that just defeats
Which
the
is-
purpose.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean,
Right. Well, that's what we currently have.
yeah, but I guess we should be drafted because I mean,
Okay. All right.
I mean, plenty of men don't want to join.
okay.
Plenty of men, plenty of men, plenty of women. Doesn't matter.
Okay.
If we gotta do what we gotta do, I mean, yeah.
Now, here's the interesting thing. You guys both have different opinions on this. I still don't know which is actually like the actual feminist position, because we'll have feminists who will argue. It's actually, we had one last week with Andrew, who said, well, it's not equitable. It's not equity for women to be drafted. That's a whole nother thing.
Interesting.
But what about you?
No.
No? Okay.
No, women should not be drafted.
Should not be drafted,
No.
but they should be paid equally in sporting events.
No comment.
Okay.
No.
They shouldn't be drafted?
I don't think so.
Well, hold on.
Okay, so everybody except Anza
Yeah.
said women shouldn't be drafted, but y'all want to be equal? So wait a sec. How are you equal if the men are the ones that have to fight and die to defend the country? The men are the ones that build and maintain all the infrastructure, right? Like none of this stuff in the studio is built or maintained by women. Do you know that like 90% of infrastructure jobs are still held by men? And that if you look at the top 20 jobs held by women now in 2024 versus 1924 are almost the exact same. So women have had 100 years to do whatever they want, and they still do the same 20 jobs they did 100 years ago, other than we switched out farm labor for HR work. But other than that, we're secretaries, nurses, daycare ladies, early childhood education, administrative assistants, retail workers, all the same shit that we were a century ago. So if the men are the ones tasked with every time there's a natural disaster, they have to go out and rescue people from the fires and the floodwaters, and every time there's a war, the men have to go and fight it and defend the country, and anytime there's a criminal who needs to be violently arrested, it's going to be a man who goes and does that, not a woman. Where does the equality come in? If we're doing the fluffy jobs, you know, we're all singers, we got a lot of singers and musicians, which is cool, it's great, I love music too. But y'all ain't like rescuing people and you know, doing the heavy lifting or the dirty or the dangerous jobs. Like who collects the trash? Men. You know, who does all the steel working and oil rig work and all of the like sewer cleaning? Men.
Tower making.
We have a video on this, Rachel, actually. Nick, remember that video we were looking at yesterday? I think it might still be on one of the tabs. Let's watch this.
Is it audio?
No audio. No audio. Go ahead.
Oh, there's no audio on it.
Yeah, go ahead. Are you ready to work on an oil rig? All right.
Come on, feminists, get in there. You
those
can
are
do
some
it.
roughnecks.
Come on,
That's-
ladies. Ladies, anyone?
definitely not strong
Andrew had to
enough for
do
that.
stuff like that back in the day. They'd lower him
Underwater
into little,
welding, I
not
guess.
not
Or-
underwater, but they would lower him into these tiny little horrifically frightening spaces to do extremely dangerous stuff.
I'm claustrophobic.
I really feel like
Yeah.
women should just have the choice to do it if they want to, because I know some women that can handle it.
They do have the choice, and they're
That's-
not.
They
doing
do,
it.
and they're not
doing it.
They
That's
don't
fine.
want to.
Well,
this
I mean,
this is the
fine.
big secret,
Yeah.
right? Is that women don't want to do any of this dirty, dangerous, scary stuff. They don't want to.
Well, yeah, but is that just, what we've been raised with, the culture
No.
we're surrounded by?
No, and I have data to back this up. So
Okay.
if you
Oh, is there more, Nick? Just let it play.
yeah, we'll just let it play. So back around the time of suffrage, we're talking like 1850s to 1920, roughly around there when the big suffrage movement was happening. Did you guys know that most women were completely against it? By all of the referendums that they would do where they would let women vote on whether they wanted to vote, only about 4% actually had any interest in voting. And they actually had really good reasons for this. There was much higher membership in anti-suffrage groups than pro-suffrage groups. And these groups would do public debates. They would do written debates, newspaper periodicals where they would go back and forth and debate these things. And the women who were against suffrage said, look, the primary purpose of government is to protect persons and property, okay? Why task women with that when we're not really capable of doing that, okay? We don't want to have to be drafted. We don't want to have to do jury duty. We don't want to have to be a political bloc, because back then women had advocacy groups for things they wanted, but they weren't a lobbying group. They didn't have like voting rights, so they weren't able to be as easily politicized. They felt like they had a moral high ground to ask for things like, we need more parks, we need better schools, we need clean air, whatever it was. And that if they became just another voting bloc, they would be involved in dirty politics, and they didn't want to do that. They felt like somebody has to be morally neutral and not involved in politics. So, given all of that, do you guys think that women can protect and defend persons and property?
Sure.
Yep.
I mean,
How?
well, first of all, I want to go back to the fact that for a long time, women weren't allowed to own property, or at least not without being married. And so,
Actually, it was the opposite. It was once you got married, you generally, whatever belonged to you belonged to your
sure,
husband,
but
same
then
kind of
usually the woman is still living with the family.
thing. Right,
and
but why would you, so think about
Yeah.
why.
Why would you wanna live on your own?
Why do you think women didn't own property?
Well,
do you think it was just the patriarchy, like just
No, I'm
hated
not
the
saying
women
that.
and
I'm
they
not
just
saying
wanted
that.
to put their boot on their neck and keep them down?
I
or-
generally don't think that.
Okay, what do you think?
I generally think it was just a matter of the times. Like, because it was, I mean,
So do you think there was a reason, though? Do you think there was a logic behind not letting
I think it
women own
worked for
property?
back then. I think it worked for what it is at that point in time.
No, I don't think you understand what I'm
Sure.
saying. So
Okay.
if you're a woman
Yeah.
and you own land and it's 1802, and bandits or cattle robbers or Indians come and they say, we're taking your land,
Yeah.
what are you going to do about it?
But that's exactly my point. That worked for that time.
Okay, what's different now?
We don't have that as much. I mean, it depends on the neighborhood, of course. I mean, it depends on the community.
Okay,
et
so
cetera.
if you own land now in 2024 and you have a squatter who comes and squats on your property and you need them removed,
I did
do
that.
you call ladies to come and physically remove them, or are there men who come and physically remove them?
So I had a subleaser who I needed to get rid of, and I did all of it. My landlord didn't do anything.
Okay, what'd you do?
I went to the court, and
Okay.
I got the papers. I took her to court. I won.
Oh wait, it was a woman squatter?
Yeah.
Oh. Well, okay. But did you physically remove her, or did cops come?
Well, did she willingly, after the judgment from the court, she willingly left?
So, okay, the lease was up. She refused to leave. And so, I got the paperwork. I gave her the 3-day notice to vacate, which is the proper way to...
Right, you're going through the eviction process.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so then, and she was still like, that's not right. It's totally illegal, even though I got it literally from the courthouse. And so then we're like, okay, let's get the proper eviction papers. Mind you, we still had the papers escorted by cops.
So did you both went to the court and there was like the eviction trial?
Yeah, and we did.
Okay.
Well, I mean, not the eviction trial.
So then-
So she did leave within the 5 days of receiving the eviction.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But, so let's say she stayed there, right?
Yeah.
Because I think this is what Rachel is getting at. Let's say she stayed there, you even won the eviction case,
Yeah.
the judge did an order. I don't know, typically after the eviction, I think they have another period of time. It depends on the state.
Yeah.
It can be 10 days, 30 days, whatever it is. And then the cops will come after a certain period of time and then forcibly remove the person. I think what Rachel's trying to get at is
Right.
who's going to forcibly remove the person, whether man or woman, if they were, even after getting a judgment from a court, they still refuse to leave.
Right. Okay. So in this case, because she left within the 5 days, I didn't have to have like the sheriff remove her.
Right.
But at least when I was giving the papers, the cops that were there were men and women. Yes, primarily men, but there were women. I mean,
Right.
who's to say there can't be more?
Well, you're talking about a process server. So you served her with the.
So it was my mother who served her, but because of the threats she was making, we had her escorted by Foot Patrol.
And that was not like a bunch of strong, independent women who marched her
It was
out
a
of
man
there.
and a woman.
Okay. And if it had just been a woman, do you see what I'm getting at? Do you see, like, who defends our national borders? Not a bunch of feminists, right? The use of force is still always going to be men.
I mean, of course,
like when you come
men
down
are
to it.
taller and bigger. Of course, they're gonna have
Now
that
you're getting it.
physical. Well, I always got it. I always
Right.
understood.
Right.
I mean, going back to the sports things. I mean, the men are gonna be able to do things that women just physically
Right.
can't. But
So when we talk about equality, the only equality women have is the illusion of equality granted to them and provided for them by men.
sure. I mean, that's why I think it depends on the context when it comes to equality. Personally,
But if you have to appeal to men and say, men, let us be equal. We demand equality. And the men go, fine, we'll enforce equality. Is that really equality?
well, that's why I think it depends on how it is being handled. Personally, I think
So it's up to the men, basically. It's always going to when you get
because
down
they're
to it,
already
you
in
have
that position. If we could flip it, and then they'd have to ask us, right? I mean,
okay. So you think we could put women on all the oil rigs, and we could put women in the Senate, we could put women in the military as generals, we could make them sheriffs, and that would work out fine?
yeah.
You think so? Okay.
I mean, well, here's the thing. I mean, for example, I remember watching this one show. I think it was called Stars and Stripes, and it took a bunch of celebrities and put them in the position of military. It had men and it had women. The person who ended up winning was the skier Peekaboo Streets, and she was a woman. She beat out actually Sarah Palin.
That guy.
She ended up beating out Sarah Palin's husband, and
this is a reality
Wait,
show?
where's this going? Where is this going?
well, for example, she ended up winning. She was in, but they were all put in position of military, and she ended up winning. It was a woman.
So do you think that men and women are the same?
I don't think they're the same. I don't. I think physically there are differences.
Okay. Just physically though? Like you don't think that men have certain strengths and women have certain strengths and they each have like different divinely appointed roles in existence?
Well, I mean, I'm an atheist personally.
Okay. Do you think that they have appointed roles in society in order for society to be mostly successful?
I think that's how it's come to be.
So can I ask you another question?
Yeah.
Do you think that women are happier today or do you think that they were happier before all of this stuff?
I
That's a good
think
question.
Because it's proven that women
Well-
are way less happier today.
okay, but is that just the stats we're looking at now? As in, like, those are the stats we're taking?
That's just ignorance is bliss.
Yeah, because I mean, for example, like people like to make the argument that we're seeing a rise in autism. Okay, is it the fact that there's a rise in autism, or did we just not take into account the fact that we didn't know what it was before?
Well, so
I think people know
I
what
can
happiness
actually
was.
explain this because it's like my area of specialty.
Sure.
There's surveys that were done, like very large scale surveys that were done in the 70s and then again in the 90s and then again in the early 2000s. So the first one that came out was called The Paradox of Female Happiness, where when they surveyed women all over the West and asked them if they were what their satisfaction levels were, a ton of different metrics were used. In the 70s, pretty good, pretty happy, not a lot wrong. By the time we get to the 90s and they repeat the survey, women are declining in happiness in the places that they have the most freedom, the most egalitarian society. So the places where women have the most equality are the places where we see them not only reporting that they have higher levels of unhappiness, but also we see a rise in alcoholism, fetal alcohol syndrome, depression, anxiety, prescription drug use. Every metric they look at, women are reporting that they are less happy. Now, there's a lot of reasons. We could talk about why that might be.
Sure.
But I think people don't understand that when women are trying to be equal, it makes life pretty impossible. You end up thinking you can have it all, do it all, be it all. Your expectations are wildly high, and you expect that you're going to be able to have a husband and a family and a career and do whatever you want, but also have a man who's going to take care of stuff. And these things all contradict each other. These things do not like mesh together well. On top of that, women are more emotionally volatile. We have a hormonal cycle every month that, you know, fluctuates. We have pre-menopause, we have postpartum, you know, we have a lot of ups and downs that men don't have.
Why does that make us more emotional? Because and I'm genuinely asking.
The literal hormone
Well,
in your
hold
body.
on. I know. But I mean, for example, let's look at like history here. So much war has been caused by men.
Well, I have something for this actually.
Yeah.
So I mean, they looked at monarchs, for example, kings and queens, and they actually found that queens were just as or even more likely to wage war than kings.
Oh, I'm not disagreeing. I think there's some real messed up women in history too, truly.
No, but they did like an analysis here. I'm not just saying there were some queens. They just comparing all of the. I don't know if it was the English monarchs, the British monarchs. I don't recall exactly the specific details of this analysis they did, but they did find that queens were more likely to wage war than kings.
Okay.
Just wanted to put that in there.
Sure. I mean, are we looking at it statistically as in, I mean, let's be real, there were probably still more kings in history than there were ever like queens that were
But it's
really in
it's
charge.
per capita.
Okay,
right?
so it is per capita.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I can't speak to that personally.
So
but
why would we think that men are going to start more war if women are more emotionally
Well-
volatile and less rational and less logical on average?
well, maybe
than
we'd
men
know
are?
that if we were taught more about those women as well. Because I mean, personally, I'm just gonna be honest with you. I mean, how many women in history can we actually name?
A ton.
Well, I mean, talking in that specific position to cause a war.
I mean, I'm an Orthodox Christian, and we have
Yeah.
tons of different queens and princesses and women who
sure.
were in various leadership positions and
Sure,
waged
but I mean-
horrific war on their enemies. And
Sure,
things like that,
it's
so.
just, it's just usually we see, queens that are just with a king. Yes. Oh,
You're getting
Sorry,
a little
sorry.
cut
Well,
off.
that would be. I could give you that, except that in the modern age, we have a whole bunch more data that proves that this is not the case.
Okay.
For example, when you look at juvenile correction facilities or women's prisons, so we were just talking about how men have the monopoly on force.
Yeah.
So men in male prisons, things like that. Generally, men grow up using physical force. And when they're little, they do rough and tumble play with their dad, with their siblings, with their friends, and they kind of learn where the boundaries are of like, how much can I beat up my friend before I go too far and actually cause harm? So they tend to learn that young, and it has an impact. Women don't have those same experiences. So what we see is that when women do have the monopoly on force, for instance, when you are a female guard in a juvenile facility or a female guard in a women's prison, the women guards are far more likely to be abusive, and the abuse tends to be worse than men. And
I have heard that.
They do think it's partially because of our emotional volatility, our hormonal fluctuations, and also just because women tend to be more likely to be on prescription psychiatric medications, have mental illnesses, and just be less used to knowing where the boundary is. So when women lose their shit and get physical, they tend to escalate to a point that's a lot
okay.
worse than what a man
Can I
would
ask
do.
then, is some of this maybe because, also we hear a lot that women don't get the resources they need in the medical field?
You mean like mental health wise?
I'm not talking necessarily mental health. Like for me personally, I took years to get diagnosed with chronic illness.
Okay.
And there's a lot of that. And there's also not as much like research on women in medicine. Again, going back to autism.
How does that relate to like the violence?
I think I kind of know what you're talking about a little bit. I'd like to offer up a bit of a rebuttal.
Okay.
So I think you're talking perhaps about how there's less testing of certain drugs on women, or like less things are tested on women. My rebuttal, though, there would be, well, one thing that's a concern is if you're testing an experimental drug on somebody, if the woman happens to be pregnant but she doesn't know it, there could be ramifications there when it comes, because for example, some medications are not recommended if you're pregnant, for example. So if you're testing something experimental, the woman doesn't know she's pregnant, you know, obviously it could be very rare that, you know, she's happened to be partaking in a trial and, you know, she's pregnant. That could be one of the justifications for why they're more inclined to test things on men. There's also like this component of, well, women, when women's hormones tend to shift a bit more throughout their cycle. So I think it's better to test on someone who has their hormones are a bit
and
more level.
I get the
But the other
stability.
thing is, it's not clear to me if it's some privilege to
Yes,
have
not have to be tested on.
to have like experimental drugs
Yeah, it's
tested on you. That seems like it would be a negative, like a more, men are so desperate for money and resources that they're willing to have experimental drugs tested on them. I think if it was actually the reverse, if it was 100% women where we were testing drugs on them, there would be a huge outcry from feminists saying, wait, why are we like subjugating women specifically to this, you know, drug treatment? That seems like...
I get what you're saying. I mean, I personally wouldn't be opposed to that.
Okay.
But
if it was 100% women,
yeah, I honestly think it's kind of necessary because
sure, but I feel like feminists would just argue and be like,
I
wait,
mean,
hold
you're-
on, this is like, look at how this is unfair.
This
Like,
isn't
why
equal.
are women
You're not
being
gonna hear that
tested
from
on?
me personally,
Okay.
but-
all right, well, that's fine.
No, I mean, for example, this is a more minor thing, but like, okay, why has recently when they test like tampons or pads, it's only now they're using real menstrual blood rather than like water or like.
But how does
It's different.
I just wonder how this gets back to what we were debating, which was why
Well, okay,
can,
so-
can women defend persons and property?
Yeah, to tie back to that.
If a hurricane takes out half the eastern seaboard, are the women going to get out there and get the power lines back up and put the sandbags out and rescue people from the floodwaters and rebuild everything?
I mean, I would certainly hope so.
No, they can't.
I
They
mean-
can't do it.
They can't do it.
Ben George donated $200.
Yo, thank you, Ben. Appreciate it, man.
So you claimed men are more dangerous and advocate for women, yet want examples of powerful women abusing power? Use Google image search for teacher arrested for essay. 90% are images of women in power.
I agree. I agree. I mean,
There's definitely a lot of that. A couple quick things.
Yeah.
Rachel, you were talking about like, you know, how aggression tends to manifest, especially young boys, for example. Would you? I don't know if you're kind of familiar with this, like how men's aggression, especially at an early age, tends to manifest itself more in the physical realm.
Yeah.
But isn't it the case that women's aggression will manifest? It might not manifest itself in the physical realm, but it will still manifest itself regardless. So reputation destruction. for
Yeah,
example.
women use subterfuge, manipulation, gossip, that sort of thing, because, right, if you can't use physical force to get your way, those are the things you're going to
no, that's true.
default to. So.
I mean, that's something we see in history as well. I mean,
Yeah.
I have a question.
No,
Yeah.
Sorry.
Wait, one more thing, actually. One more thing. Also, when it comes to like physical, I don't know, were we talking about like violence at all? I don't know if that was kind of.
yeah, we
A little
were
bit.
like military, and then yeah.
So, I mean, what do you think about this? So, I mean, you were saying, well, men throughout history have been a bit more violent. So I saw this, I've seen the stat a couple times. So if we're looking at heterosexual couples, lesbian couples, and gay couples, we actually find that, for example, gay couples, so two men in a relationship, the rate of domestic violence is actually lowest amongst homosexual gay men. It's in the middle for heterosexual couples, and the incidence rate of domestic violence in lesbian couples is actually the highest.
Okay.
So that's an interesting thing, because when you have two men, you would think, well, men tend to be more violent. Why is it then that when you put two men in a relationship, the incidence of violence, domestic violence, is the lowest?
Okay, can I play
And then
devil's
when
advocate?
there's two women together, it's the highest.
Oh, can I play devil's advocate for a second?
Go ahead.
Okay, so we like to typically, I think, make out anyone who's, let's say, gay to be, well, they're more feminine. And then we look at women who are lesbian and we're like, well, they're more masculine. So is that what in the brain, what's making that happen then?
This is similar to what I wanted to ask. Do we believe that,
I mean, that's a fair question, but go ahead.
like, every female, well, first of all, women and men, we both have testosterone and estrogen, right?
Yeah.
And it can be imbalanced. So I feel like it depends on the person, and we can't like box everything in.
Sure.
Well, yeah,
Going back
but
to
we can
health.
take a look at statistical averages, and another important data point is that although when men tend to do domestic violence, the damage can be greater, women are more likely to initiate domestic violence than men, and men are less likely to report it than women are.
Because they're less likely to be believed.
I'll give you that.
Yeah.
I want to go back to the draft really quick.
Yeah, go for it.
I wanted to go back to you two guys. I think both of you said no, women shouldn't be drafted. I was just curious, why not?
I think because there's a difference between men and women. Because men are, physically stronger, and like,
Sure.
I feel like, I don't know, if you enlist everybody, then
So can I ask you a question, a follow-up on that? So you say men are physically stronger. Do you think then, if that's the case, if women shouldn't be subject to forced military conscription, should women be barred from volunteering for the military?
no, I think
Well, why? So why are they barred from forced military conscription, but they're able to volunteer? Because it occurs to me, like, for example, in peacetime, or in wartime, there could perhaps be a greater need for more soldiers. Whereas in peacetime, do you need them?
Women just join the military so they can get free college.
Oh, wow.
Wait, so, so men are stronger, that's
Even though the
why.
benefit isn't really even happening anymore.
And then what about you? You said women should not be drafted. Why is that?
Well, when I said it was for the same reason that like men are physically stronger, and I was for what you said about like volunteering. I feel like the women who choose to volunteer would be physically strong as well, but like.
Oh, were you going to come in on this? Or?
Okay, well then, yeah, I'm not gonna deny men are physically stronger. That's just a thing. But then, you were saying how, women have to use their brain because they gotta make up for what they lack in strength, right? So then who's to say that the brains can't be used in situations in the military as well?
Well, that would be a great point as well, except for this thing called greater male variability, which if you look at, you can look at a number of different metrics. I was just on Timcast and we were talking about grip strength as an example.
I saw that.
But you can do it with IQ, you can do it with all different measures of aptitude. And what we see is that women tend to cluster around the mean more than men. And there's this small percentage of men and in anything that are so much better at everybody else that it's like not even close. So as a woman, if you're trying to be a CEO, a general in the military, a strategist in the military, trying to be a police officer, a detective, anything like that, you're going to have to compete with this tiny
Private jet.
top tier of men that is going to be so far ahead of you that the odds of you beating them are very, very small, which is why even after 100 years of equality, we don't see a lot of women at the top of these highly competitive pursuits, like being a CEO, like being a 4-star general in the military, like being the president, things like that. So it's one of the differences that makes it really tough for women to compete. So even if you're very smart for a woman, you may not be able to compete with that top tier of men.
I don't like that.
Statistically.
So you're saying men are just naturally smarter?
Well,
I'm
you
saying
mentioned
that
the
the top-
variability
yes,
thing, right?
the
Nick, can you pull that up? We'll just
Yeah.
look at it. So
Okay.
there's this, this is like, Nick, can you make it smaller, please?
Yeah.
And then I'm also going to find you just the article. Hold on. I'm sending that to you in private chat. Pull that up, please. Get it quick if you can. So it's this idea that I think isn't it even the case that women are on average smarter?
Yes.
Or is it?
There's
wait.
more of us that are in that middle gathering around the
Yeah.
mean.
So I'll read this really quick. Okay.
But the men who are smartest are way ahead. Generally.
The variability hypothesis, also known as the greater male variability hypothesis, is the hypothesis that males generally display greater variability in traits than females. Pull that one back up, Nick, the chart. Just click on it.
Yeah.
Okay, so basically what they're saying is that there's more stupid men. There's a lot more dumb men.
Sure.
but there's like also like a greater proportion of like really, really smart men.
Okay.
But then there's like more women who are in the middle.
Right.
Okay, then that kind of goes back to my point, though. Then if there's more women in the middle, then what's the harm then of actually? Because that means we're having greater odds of having smart women than we are. We're risking more by having a.
I'm not
defined
saying
a higher
smart women
IQ.
can't do smart girl things. I'm
No,
a
I'm
smart woman who does smart girl things.
clearly.
But when we're talking about who should be like at the apex of society running things, generally men are going to have the monopoly on force, strength, cognitive skills, leadership skills, social skills. They're just that top bit of men are going to be so far ahead.
Okay, but going back to your point, then how does that affect the draft? Because that's not the top tier. That draft is
but
just...
the draft is just you have to be physically capable, and like you
Sure.
are a tiny girl.
I know.
If you had to jump in tomorrow and do the PT prescriptions that men have when
Literally
they join
have
the
a booster
military,
seat.
yeah, you couldn't do it. And I'm like a really strong girl. I've done powerlifting and weightlifting for years. I've got like a 250 pound for 5 reps deadlift right now. I've got a 200 pound squat. But you put me next to a man who's my size that doesn't even train, and he's gonna whoop my ass.
But for example, like what if there's an emergency situation, when you're out in the field, I think I'm okay to say this, the more likely to see a man just kind of like brute his way through it rather than like, okay, think how can we problem solve this so nobody gets more injured or in a less risky situation, I should say. So
you think that on average women are more strategic than men?
I'm not saying strategic, but I mean if we're looking at like, the mean average of, the brain kind of thing, then, wouldn't it be fair to say that they're going to be more able to look at those situations better than the average we're seeing based off the graph you gave us?
I'm not really sure what you're asking.
So, in those risky situations, then if the mean average is that, the women are going to overall have a decent IQ, then they'd be more likely to handle those risky situations where we really need to think about it than, say, the average we're going to find.
That's not really how it works. And when you're entering the military, they test you.
Sure,
right?
I know that.
If you're below a certain IQ, you're not going to be in the field doing certain things for that
Are you
reason.
saying that we assess risk differently?
Right.
And men do not take as much time to assess those risks, and they just jump right in.
Well, women are more risk averse, but usually in a military situation, that's going to be bad.
Well, yes. No, you want to be on your toes because, of course, you never know what's going to happen.
Women are very conflict avoidant, and on average, they don't want to be in the military.
Well, here's the thing then. Then why is there a problem having an equal amount, like an equal opportunity for drafting men and drafting women then? So that means we're having equal risk takers and equal, maybe not risk takers. Do we want that fair bit of both?
So what you're telling me is, all throughout human history, armies have been made of men. Sure. And now, because it's 2024 and technology, we should put all of, look at the table of ladies here. You all are lovely. You're probably great singers. You're beautiful. But do I want you on the front lines fighting? No, I don't.
Sure, I get that.
I want women on the front lines. I'm a feminist.
So she
send them.
all
You know what? I think we do total switch up. Men don't get to get drafted, and we just draft with the women. Use the women as meat shields for a little bit. Soften the enemy up a little bit. Then the men can come in.
I think something that's interesting.
Take care of it. We'll take care of it. The women soften them up.
I think something that's interesting is that you're saying we have equal portions of men and women entering the military, but then what you would have to do is you would have to separate those roles once they enter the military, and then then it's not equal anymore. So what is the point of doing that?
I do get what you're saying. Well, I mean, based off the physical stuff like we're talking about again, I think that would have to depend on the woman. I mean, look at some of the women in the Olympics; they could totally do it, right?
Could they?
Yeah,
like who?
I mean, those are also outliers as well.
Like 1%.
I know they're outliers.
So when we're talking about this kind of stuff, you have to think about in general, the women in general and bigger numbers.
Sure.
Olympians are.
I'm not denying that. I think, if anything, if we are going to have a draft with women, we need to. We all have to go through a physical, even if we're being drafted, right? So, I mean, we then assess. Okay, what can we best put them to.
Well, then, like, most women are not going to meet the requirements. And
well, it depends on the
remember
position.
that they've opened up all of the special forces to women for what, 20, 30 years now? 20 years, something like that? Not a single woman has been able to pass Navy SEALs or BUDS or like the different Green Beret train. Women just can't do it.
Well, and going along with that, I
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't want them to lower that standard so that women could.
They
right?
do. No. But here's the thing.
Oh, they have to
It
do
is
like
a
less
different
push-ups.
standard.
and
It is a
whatnot.
different
Yeah.
standard. And this isn't just for the military. It's for police force, firefighters.
Yeah.
So like I think for the military, you know, there's a speed test in terms of being
it's a
able to
lie.
complete
None of it
a
is really
mile or I don't know
Right.
how long.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a lie.
Push-ups.
Well, this is the thing is
these things.
women always will say, like, we want to be equal, so you have to let us do these things. You have to, first of all, if they have to let you, it's not equal.
Right.
Second of all, if they have to lower the standard for you to get in, it's also not equal. So it's all just this illusion, this silly illusion, and I don't want to. I'm sick of it. I think that
She's sick of it.
I think that in the not so distant future, a few generations from now, they're going to look back on this feminist experiment and go, "Whoa, that was a disaster. Glad we got rid of that," because it's simply not sustainable. We can't even keep going with it because birth rates have tanked.
Right.
Right. So either
Tanked.
maybe it won't go away, and then humanity will just go extinct.
There will be a reset, and like people always ask me what I think it'll be, and I think it's going to be painful and ugly. There's like a couple ways it could go, but it's not going to be fun for anyone when it happens.
How do you
Whoever
anticipate
gets
it going?
AI first, we're in trouble. I don't know. It could be China. Who knows what happens? Okay.
And the best part, they claim women are less happy with more freedom. So, what, take their rights back and hand them an apron? This debate was a disaster. Should women be drafted? Let me know and check out these other videos YouTube picked for you.